We come to order, please, for the regular council meeting of July 13th, 2026. The first order of business is I'm going to read a statement for the record of a closed meeting that the council had on Wednesday, June 24th, 2026. On June 24th, 26, the mayor and town council met virtually in open session via Zoom. President were Mayor Stroud, council members Jerry Lee Bennett, Chris Deutsch, Eric Caselli, and Phil Schulp. Assistant Town Manager Kayla Bucher was also in attendance at 6 p.m. Councilmember Schulp moved to go into closed session pursuant to Maryland Code General Provisions, Article Section 3-305B1, to discuss the employment and compensation of candidates for employment over whom the town council has jurisdiction and other personnel matters that affect this specific individual. Councilmember Deutsch seconded the motion, which was approved unanimously. During the closed meeting, the town council authorized Mayor Stroud to execute a new employment agreement with the town manager. The closed meeting adjourned at 6:31. First order of business is approval of tonight's agenda. I will entertain a motion to approve and adopt that agenda. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve and adopt the agenda as stated.
Here,
I'll
second.
second.
Thank you, Bill. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, approval of tonight's agenda is unanimous. Next order of business is approval of the consent agenda, which this evening consists of the approval of the June 8th, 2026 Town Council meeting minutes, approval of the June 24th, 2026 Special Town Council meeting minutes, approval of the June 24th, 26 closed meeting minutes, and a mayoral appointment to the Parks Advisory Committee. Let's start with the June 8th, 2026 minutes. I will entertain a motion to adopt those minutes. Do I hear a motion to do so?
I'll make a motion to adopt.
I hear a second.
Second.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Approval of the June 8th, 2026 Town Council meeting minutes is unanimous. Next, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the June 24th, 2026 Special Town Council meeting minutes. Do I hear a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes of June 24.
Second.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, approval of the June 24th, 2026 Town Council meeting minutes is unanimous. Next, I will entertain a motion to adopt the June 24, 2026 closed council meeting minutes. Do I hear a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll make the motion to approve the June 24th closed council meeting.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, approval of the June 24, 2026 closed meeting minutes is unanimous. Finally, I will give a very brief bio and then entertain a motion to appoint Aruna Lepore to the Parks Advisory Committee with a term of service ending in June 2027. Ms. Lepore holds an MBA from the University of Florida.
Excuse me.
Yes.
I see it with a term expiration of April 28th or April 2028.
Yeah.
You said June.
So this specific appointment is going to expire in June 2027. And the reason for that is that the individual wanted the optionality to take a look at it. It may be extended, but she wanted to make sure that, you know, she was able to kind of continue that. Is that?
No, that's fine. So we just need to update this to say June of 27th. Thanks.
So stated. Ms. Lepore holds an MBA from the University of Florida with educational background in marketing research. She completed additional training in early childhood education. The latter afforded her a keen understanding of safety awareness, particularly with playground and park environments. She is vice president of the Garrett Park Community Fund and is currently a substitute teacher at Garrett Park Elementary School. Her appointment is enthusiastically supported by Councilmember Deutsch, our liaison to this committee. Do I hear a motion to approve Ms. Lepore's appointment?
You may remember that the initial appointments were staggered.
Mhm.
So the April date is correct. That slot was 2.5 years initially.
Mhm.
So I thought there was some question about the date when the term expired.
Yeah, that was Councilmember Schultz's
Okay.
question as well. For the record, if it's easier to have April of 2028 in there for now, we can certainly do that. And in fact, why don't I state it as such? A term of service ending in April of 2028. Is that consistent, Councilmember Schultz, with your, okay.
Thank you.
Barb, is that?
Yes,
Yeah,
I thought there was a question. I apologize if I misunderstood.
No, not at all.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, great. And do I hear a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, approval of the appointment is unanimous. Next order of business will be presentation by residents. Are there any residents here or online that would like to present to the council this evening? Do we have anyone online? I don't believe we do.
We had one person. No, we have one resident who is participating virtually tonight.
Okay, great. The next order of business will be discussion around 2 contract awards and a resolution to update town hall rental fees. On the contract awards, Barb, I'll have you walk us through those. On the resolution to update town hall rental fees, I believe that we can discuss that a little bit more, and we can talk through options. I think there was some question around specific wording. So just to kind of preface that subject with that. Barb, do you care to walk us through the initial items?
Sure.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. So related to the Cambria Park Improvements Project, this bid was posted to the state procurement site as well as the town website on May 20th. Just as a reminder, the planned park improvements include regrading of the field, some fencing replacement, a slight expansion of the playing area towards the railroad tracks, and the addition of a small retaining wall on the east side. All work must be completed by October 30th of this year. A pre-bid,
Let's start, her.
I can tell you if I can just,
After the pool closes, I hope.
Whatever that.
yeah, there'll be
Sure.
there'll be some pre-construction work that has to happen. So one of the things, DPS is now requiring a soil boring and a report. We've gone ahead and initiated that work. Following tonight's vote, we will be issuing a notice of award and getting the contract signed. That basically gives the contractor approximately 6 weeks to do some pre-construction work, including some wall design that they will need to do on their own and permitting. It's anticipated that they'll probably do some stakeout work and we'll have a pre-construction meeting towards the last week of August. They will be able to do some work as long as it doesn't impact the pool. That was made very clear to them. As well as the need to make sure that when the pool fence comes down, basically temporary fencing has to go back up, even if the pool will be closed. So we envision the temporary fencing going in sometime after Labor Day. And basically they should hopefully have already done all their pre-construction activities and get rocking and rolling after the pool closes. So that's kind of the envisioned schedule. We did receive 4 bids. All bids were deemed to be responsive. Included in your agenda packet is a letter from Jason Azar of Clark Azar and Associates, basically just detailing that all the bids were deemed to be responsive. We are recommending that the contract be awarded to Superior Facilities Management Services, also known as SFMS, in the amount of $207,379. More tenured members of the group may recall that SFMS was a contractor back in award in 2024, I believe it was. Work continued into 2025. So this is the same firm.
What did they do?
They basically did sidewalk work and on Waverly, road resurfacing in a number of areas. They did the intersection reconfiguration at Argyle and Kenilworth. And they put a speed bump in on Weymouth.
Okay, did we ever disapprove them for a contract?
Who?
Superior Facilities?
Did we disqualify them?
Yes.
No, there was no reason to do
Or
so.
is not disqualified, maybe they weren't the best responsive. Somebody we did, and I don't remember who that was.
No, it was not SFMS.
Okay.
Yeah, no, we would not be recommending them tonight if we had any concerns.
Yeah, it was
Um,
a few years ago, and we had somebody, we looked them up, they had bad reviews, I think.
We had actually overall very, very positive experience with SFMS. I mean, I've talked to some other municipalities. They were very good at communicating things, very good in addressing any concerns of residents, and basically even modified their work plans on a couple of occasions because of issues that, just concerns residents had expressed. So we had no concerns about them at all. I
My
would-
mistake.
Yeah, I would just mention that the bid documents did include pricing for 3 bid alternates. These were a variety of soil mixes that had been talked about in our discussions with former Mayor Keller, Councilmember Deutsch. Those 3 bid alternates included like a 2-inch sand cap, a 3-inch sand cap, and 1-inch compost, a 5-inch sand cap, and 1-inch compost. Based on the alternate pricing we received truthfully from all the bidders, but since we're recommending SFMS, Mr. Azar is not recommending acceptance of any of the alternates just because the pricing was just not reasonable in his opinion. And that may just be due to a lack of familiarity with soil mixes. So we are recommending, once again, that the contract be awarded to SFMS in the amount of $207,379.
Barb,
Mhm.
given that this is slightly over the amount that we had in the capital budget, at least in the June town manager's report, by about $7,000, are you proposing to take that out of other line items from parks and open spaces or the contingency?
Yeah, just a reminder, so the report you're looking at would have been from last month's meeting, which
Right,
would have
we
been the
don't
month
have
of
one this
May.
month.
You added funding to the project as part of your FY 2027 budget. And those numbers are not reflected in that since that was a May report. So there is adequate funding.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
There will be some just additional cost on top of the amount to be paid to SFMS. Obviously, there will be continual work by Clark Azar and Associates. And as I mentioned, Jason and I talked about the requirement to have a soil boring and report, and we've gone ahead and undertaken that work so that there's no delay because of that.
And is there additional work our maintenance crew has to do to nurture our new soil?
You may recall, yeah, in one of the meetings that we had with Jason Azar, I apologize, I can't remember exactly what it was called, but there was something that Montgomery Parks and MCPS both do with some of their fields to basically, it's a little bit different than an aeration, but something similar to that. So that will be something as ongoing maintenance, just to extend the life of it.
And I assume they're using a seed that is good for fields and traffic and all of that for what they're gonna plant there.
Yeah, that was specified in the bid. I apologize, Lisa. I don't remember exactly what it was off the top of my head, but
They know it's gonna be for a field for playing games on.
yes,
Good.
they're aware of that.
Thank you, Barb. Is there a specific action? My apologies. Is there to it?
Yeah,
I know that we received the bid. I know Jason Azar very clearly is in favor of moving forward, although all 4 were responsive. Are we looking for approval this evening to approve that?
yes, we do need town council approval because it's a dollar amount. So there should be a motion and a second and a vote.
Why don't we do these iteratively as opposed to going through them all? On the Cambria Park improvements project with the award. Barb was kind enough to inform us, Councilmember Bennett, thank you for your question on budgeting. This appears to be within the budget. Are there any questions from council members before I ask for a vote?
The only thing I would ask is if, and maybe I'll pose this to my council colleagues, is it worth seeing, I mean, I think we can approve this, but is it also worth seeing what pricing they did provide for these
Alternative.
alternates? I mean, we
soils.
asked for them for a reason, and I'm not gonna pretend I know tons about turf and grass and how to, but I
Soil.
assume these are measures to improve or protect your grass field.
Yeah, I can bring those up if you'd like.
I was curious what those numbers were. And is that something that could be added back in at some point before a certain point in the project?
So this was from the SFMS bid. So as I mentioned, alternate one was the 2-inch sand cap. That was $12,364. The alternative two, which was the 3-inch sand cap and a 1-inch compost, was $28,894. Alternate three was the 5-inch sand cap and 1-inch compost. That was just under $39,995.
And Jason's analysis was that
It was,
at that price, it's too much.
that
And
was
I'm
his
sure he
feeling.
Weighed that against whatever future work would need to be done
Yes,
to
he,
repair the field if it doesn't have a 2-inch sand cap.
yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Any other thoughts to share from council members? Councilmember Deutsch, any other follow-up questions? I think that's a good one.
I have a high level question. It's not necessarily about this bid, but one of the bidders was nearly 3 times as much. Was there a particular reason for that?
It had to do with the retaining wall. Essentially that company kind of blew the pricing on that, I believe. Their retaining wall price was about 10 times what everybody else's was. So
Hmm.
they just, who knows why they did it, but they clearly didn't understand
It's a
what was being requested in the bid.
significant benefit of multiple bids, I would say.
Yeah.
Just administratively, Barb, because I think Councilmember Deutsch's question is a good one. If we are to approve the bid as is now, the $207,000, if we were to do a little bit further investigation and deem that, perhaps alternate number 2 or number 3 is something we should consider, can that be done iteratively? In other words, we would approve the 207, and then if there was some pressing need perhaps to explore another alternative that could then subsequently be voted on, or is?
Yes, I mean, you could consider that. Obviously, this project, that would be done through the change order process.
Okay. That's perfect.
Yeah,
But you want to do it before they lay the,
correct.
Oh,
I was
sure.
going to say there are timing issues.
From a timing standpoint, it would have to be done pretty quickly. I'm just
Um,
curious, and I'm not proposing that that's the alternative approach that we
No,
want, but
what I could do is, as we're going through this week with the contract execution process, so I can check with the principal at SFMS and just ask him if we were to change our mind on this, what is their timing in terms of that being,
One.
that trigger needing to be pulled?
And maybe help educate us on what the benefit of a sand cap. is.
Yeah. Yeah, I can ask Jason maybe to put something together. He's going to be much more well-versed given all the work he does for MCPS.
Yeah.
And just ask him to lay that out and I can forward that all to you.
Okay.
that's great. Thanks so much. So I'll entertain a vote right now on awarding or to following Clark Azar and Associates recommendation to award this bid to SFMS at the current price of $207,000. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That is unanimous. Barb, thank you so much. For Barb, you want to take us through the next contract award for the 2027 road improvements project, please?
Sure. So as
Thank you.
just a reminder, this bid includes both road paving as well as curbs in some locations.
Is it asphalt curbs?
No, we're only doing concrete curbs now. So, so this project was bid in mid-June. It was posted to eMaryland Marketplace Advantage, that is the state procurement site. We also post things on our website, though we don't typically get much bid traffic through that. The pre-bid meeting was on June 25th. The deadline for submissions was July 7th. We received 5 bids. All were deemed to be responsive. Included in your agenda packet is Clark Azar's evaluation of the 5 bids and its award recommendation. We are recommending that the project be awarded to Espina Paving in the amount of $328,500. So the streets that will be paved, there were some changes from what we talked about back in March because we did have involved the maintenance crew and just got some input from them. So the streets that will be paved are a section of Kenilworth, Oxford, Raleigh, our section of the Penn Place parking lot. And then on Rokeby, in addition to road paving, there will also be some curb work that is being done. The way the bid was structured is there were specific line items. In terms of the known items, they were also given sort of a quantity kind of hybrid example in terms of if full depth patching is required, which we often, as you know, don't know until we mill the street. So basically, the low bid is once again was Espina Paving in the amount of $328,500. So I believe this is a new company to us. I know Jason, they've done some work with Espina. They did some work in another city that I worked in for Maryland. So they will be a new contractor for us. As you'll kind of see when you look at the bid results, you kind of had about 3 bids that were sort of roughly grouped together. And then 2, I can't even begin to explain what they did in terms of how high their pricing was.
Was the SFMS bidder up for this project the same as the one that we?
Mhm. Yes.
Any questions from council members? Councilmember Bennett, you had a question?
Barb, I think it might just be a typo header improvement, but the attachment here says Cambria Park improvements. Is it actually the bids? Even though it says Espina Paving and the other,
Mm,
it
I
says
guess-
Cambria Park improvements.
What I'm looking
I'm
at,
assuming that's just a typo. From
Um,
that Clark's are on their,
Mhm.
on the bid results.
oh,
I'm assuming that's just an error, right?
correct. I mean, I can bring up if
Okay,
you
I
want
just
to
thought,
see the.
well, the wrong document, so.
No, no,
Make sure I'm
no.
Looking at the right thing.
Yes, it was just a header and I apologize for not catching that, but that is definitely the road paving.
Okay.
Yeah, we want to make sure that the reason Espina Paving wasn't the low bidder is because they were bidding on a different project.
Okay.
We're gonna pave the park. All right, that
Yeah,
solves 2
no,
problems.
MT Laney did not bid on Cambria, so it's the
Um,
right group.
Very quickly, could you give a quick overview of what the scope of work for paving work is in FY 27?
Also, I'd be interested if we're gonna notify the people who live there and how long the work's gonna take, and are they gonna be able to use half of the road when the other half is being done?
Yeah, those, we certainly notify residents because obviously they can't pave with cars on the street. So once this award is made, we will start basically notifying people just given the timing. So this work will also need to be done, let me see what the due date, I think it's right around November 1st, because that's when the asphalt plants start closing. So we will be notifying everybody. The scope of work, sorry, I'm just looking it up. There have been changes. As I mentioned, it'll be a section of Kenilworth. And just kind of get down to the bid thing, sorry. Oxford, Rokeby, part of the Penn Place parking lot. Rokeby is also getting curbs. I think that's everything. I'm just looking at the maps here. Raleigh is also being paved.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions before I ask one or two? Councilmember Schultz?
Oh, I was just gonna ask, and wasn't there some grass? Did you see something about some turf or grass on this?
Grass.
In the right of ways?
I don't know, maybe well, that's what it was.
Um,
Or,
They'll usually, I mean, if the right of way gets disturbed, like when they're doing curb work, then there usually is some seed and straw that's required.
okay.
Any other questions? Barb, may I ask, just for the record and clarification, I guess the first question is the duration of this project, because I think Councilmember Max brings up a good point. We want to make sure that we're communicating with the folks who are going to have street parking affected. Do you know how long it's going to take them to, I know they're doing kind of section by section.
Yeah, for those of you who were here in the 24-25 project, a different company, but they'll approach it probably the same way where they move from one area to the other. We have not had any contact with the Spino yet because obviously we were waiting for after this discussion. So we'll start talking to them about their schedule. As I mentioned, work has to be completed by November 1st, so we'll start working with them. We may go ahead and start reaching out to those who live on the streets because a lot of people travel during the summer. So what we may do is go ahead and start reaching out to people to say if they do plan on traveling anytime in the near future, it might be helpful if they either make sure that they park their car in their driveway or leave a key with the neighbor. If for some reason they have to leave their car on the street. So we don't have a good idea of when they're starting, when. We'll start talking to them about that once the contract gets signed, hopefully later this week.
Great. And then just for the record, the winning bid per the process conducted by Azar and Associates, 328,500 was within budget of what we had budgeted for.
Yes.
Okay.
You may recall that during the budget process, we've got a significant amount of road work that is kind of in the coming years. So we will be using some of our highway user funds, basically everything that we had, just to go ahead and get that spent and kind of cleared out with the state reporting. But yes, there'll still be some funding in that line
Okay.
item.
Thank you.
And just as a reminder, it says the FY 2027 because that's what it is. But we actually looked at what was coming up on the schedule for both FY 2027 and 2028.
Right.
And as you may recall from the budget process, for those of you who were part of that, we went ahead and combined the 2 years just because we got better pricing because there was more work involved.
Well done. That's great. Any other questions or ask for a vote? I'll entertain a vote to award the contract per the process run by Azar and Associates for the fiscal year 2027 road improvement project to Espina Paving. All in favor? Is that unanimous? We get, okay.
Like it?
All right, unanimous it is. Thank you very much. Barb, thanks for all your work. Kayla, thank you for all your work. The next item on the agenda was the resolution number 2026-4, modifying town hall rental and use policy. Kayla, I want to just thank you for all the hard work you've done. I think that what we're going to do is we're going to defer this discussion to the next town council meeting. The reason for it is I think the intent is exactly where we wanted to be. We want to make sure that the language is consistent with what the council was had talked about at previous council meetings. But I do want to thank you for all your hard work. I know there a lot of time went into that. Yes, ma'am.
It might be appropriate to set the rental fees after the renovation is done. So we can see what it looks like and have people look at it, and then maybe we'd be in a better position to set rental fees for the new
Yeah.
development.
So I do want to just hop in, Councilmember Max. We had not touched the rental fees. That was not the direction given by council at the last meeting. This was solely to clarify alcohol and piano fees, as well as to make clear that a security deposit was required for anyone renting town hall for any time.
Okay.
I am happy to bring this back for discussion in September. You all have the documentation, and I think at this point, I've got a good line of contact with Montgomery County ABS. So if you ponder this and find questions, please let me know and I'd be happy to work with them to get a clear answer of what we can and can't do while still being compliant with county regulations.
My only advice would be to make it as simple as possible and as streamlined as possible. So there's not, it makes it as easy as possible for the people renting to comply.
Well said.
I
Mhm.
think the other thing I'll note, just for future work of this kind, is that I was a little surprised because, you know, with the header on the draft resolution is updating town hall rental fees. That was sort of what was
Right.
the tenor of what we discussed, and the memo is really a change in policy and procedure and enforcement. And so, which is okay, it's okay to, we should be, talk that all through and make some decisions, but, you know, I think the expectation that this could be adopted at this meeting, you know, when there's so much that's changed from what we talked about, puts us in a somewhat tricky position. So I just throw that out there as a something we may want to work through it from a process standpoint, because I think what came back was more extensive and more substantive than the discussion we had, and that's okay, but you know, it wouldn't be something I think we could pass having seen it for like 3 days.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the thoughts and the broader conversation. One of the options I will throw out to everyone sitting before us is at one point several months ago, Jeanette Lichten-Wallner, who's not present tonight, but many of you know, does a lot of our records management and has helped immensely with finding kind of how we ended up with the existing policy. She and I had started to build together kind of a survey monkey survey aimed solely to go to the selected body about your thoughts on changing the rental fees, about certain policies administration. What I would ask council to consider is if I were to send that out to you, I know we have our August recess, but it would be a forum for you all to provide some more in-depth commentary, thoughts about the direction you'd like to see, while also giving us a chance to develop a draft and have a longer turnaround time. If I were to send that out to the elected body, would you be interested in kind of walking through what staff has identified as areas we'd like direction, or would you prefer that the September return be a much more tightly focused, clarifying alcohol, piano, and security deposit?
So Kayla, I think it's those options, it's good to have those options. I think that the direction that we had and what we'll talk through if we need a special meeting, we can, was laser focused on not on reopening kind of aspects of the existing policy, as it were. Not that any policy can't be improved, it certainly can, but I think that the consensus that was gathered from council members was very specifically aimed at kind of the policy on the piano and alcohol. So to the extent that we're able to, you know, again, perhaps we can go back and revisit some of the other policies. The pricing, I agree, there's
No.
always work that can be done.
There's work that can be done. I think what we found is
Yeah.
the direction that Barb and I had noted from the June 8th conversation touched very heavily on council wanted to waive the municipal alcohol fee, waive the piano fee. They still wanted to connect piano usage data. And there was a recurring thread of wanting to be compliant with Montgomery County alcohol regulations. I
Yeah.
think once we started peeling back the layers of what county regulations look like, that's part of what contributed to a more substantial policy. It's a complex situation, but we can always do a simplified version in September. Thank you guys for reviewing, and if you have further thoughts, I look forward to hearing them.
That does mean the alcohol fee, the piano fee is still in play until at earliest October. Is that right?
I would say that the earliest is September. If there is if there's a simplified policy that comes forward in September, a resolution does have the benefit of you adopt it, it can go into effect immediately. So if you adopt it at the September council meeting, the Tuesday that follows, Jeanette and I can work to roll out the updates to the portal, to do all of that. As you might have noticed in the staff memo, we did temporarily suspend the ability for folks to make reservations just until we got clear action on the policy. We will be opening the portal back up at the existing policy and rate and procedure tomorrow.
When are we planning to close this for the renovation?
I believe the most recent thing I had heard was in the fall. That is
Right.
obviously contingent upon a number of moving parts. Mayor Stroud has been the kind of owner's rep with Wiedemann Architects, and he might be better able to speak to
Yeah,
when
I'm
we
gonna,
put the building.
yeah, that's a good point. Councilmember Sally, do you have a point?
I was just thinking, for efficiency purposes, and I think Councilwoman, was suggesting something similar, right? In the sense that if we're going to look at this policy, maybe we look at other aspects as well and then wait for renovation rather than do it piecemeal.
Mhm. I'm gonna move us to the next item unless anyone else has.
Just one last thing, so. Whether or not we end up passing something before the work begins. Between now and what I don't want is to get back in here in September. And then we're talking about the same thing again, so send edits, send a markup, I think it's.
Send wording, send thoughts. If we get a situation where multiple folks have weighed in and have divergent wording desires. For those of you who are here for the procurement policy, I think that was only council members Schulp, Max, and Bennett. You might recall that we put up a PowerPoint with some very specific phrasing and kind of made you do the optometrist A or B, 1 or 2, which is sharper. If, of course, we only have 1 or 2 people weighing in and they weigh in with compatible edits, that simplifies it, but you all have time to consider your phrasing, to weigh in. So we can bring back something with edits in September if those edits are provided over the coming weeks.
Should, you want to set a timeline on edits? We'll actively solicit.
Well, I mean, it sounds like it'd be, 2 weeks prior to the September.
2 weeks prior to September would be kind of good and ideal as you, I know many of you have travel plans coming up. So what I would say is between now and end of August, beginning of September, for those who are traveling for Labor Day.
Is there any reason we need to do this before we do the renovation? Because it seems like we're gonna do it and then we're closing this anyway, so why are we rushing to do this now?
Yeah, if I can answer that, I think Councilmember Max, the point is a good one. There are, and certainly we want to be cognizant of when it closes, right? When town hall closes. I think this is something that I'd like to resolve this. I'd like to resolve just the specific area around on the alcohol and the piano, because I think we've agreed as a council, you've agreed as a council to resolve.
In the well, I mean, the tone and tenor of the friction that caused this to bubble up in the first place, I don't think is going to go away.
Yeah. And the wording. So if I could just say, we are July 13th. Our next meeting is not until September. I don't know if it's 14th or 15th. I would ask that if there are edits from the council, if you could do so. What's a fair and realistic timeline to get that in over the next?
I would say the September meeting is September 14th. I would say August ends on the 31st. That would give you 7 weeks if you get all your comments in by August 31st.
I think what I would prefer is to have a little bit more time than 2 weeks. So if
Then
I
do we
can,
want to say August 10th, which would be the second Monday? That gives you a full month. And
so any comments that any council members have, if you could please submit them by August 10th. We want to be cognizant of the open meetings rules as well. So you can submit those if you could, please, by August 10th. That would be greatly appreciated.
Do we want to run this by the Citizens Association or somebody else in terms of a committee who might want to weigh in on some of this?
if we were to do a committee, I would recommend Mr. Jim Cole spoke at the last meeting. He had served on the 2013 committee that developed town hall rental fees and policies. It might be appropriate if we went to do it by committee to go back to the well, so to speak, given his depth of knowledge.
got a lot of information. I don't know. I don't want to speak for the CA, but I think based on the initial decisions that were made at the last meeting, I feel comfortable that's aligned with what that answers the questions and concerns that they had.
Okay.
Yeah, I think just to follow on that, the point of clarification is in the June meeting, that direction given by council was informed by feedback from Mr. Cole, from the CA, from a lot of disparate groups. I would say that we have gone through that process, and now it's a matter of making sure that the wording is consistent with the intent from the June meeting. Kayla, thank you so much for spearheading that.
So I want to make sure I understand what we're agreeing to. So despite Councilmember Max and Member Sally recommending a holistic process, we're going to limit our September discussion just to the two topics brought up by the Citizens Association. So our comments should be limited to those. And then later, when the renovations are done and we're getting closer to reopening, we'll review the town hall rental policy holistically. Is that the correct understanding? So we're going to do this twice, but right now we're limiting ourselves just to the alcohol and piano policy. So our comments should be just about the alcohol and piano.
I agree.
That's correct.
Okay, just want to make sure I understand.
And it's a great clarification. And the idea is that this will be iterative. The second iteration, we will have considerable amount of time when town hall is closed. So, but yes, that is the 1-2 approach that we have. Next order of business is any, did I skip over you? I'm sorry, Barb. Next order of business is the town manager's reports. Would you mind walking us through this, please?
Sure.
Thanks, Barb.
Just a moment. So you may have noticed that there is not a financial report in your agenda packet. Basically, we are working to close out FY 2026. There are still revenues being received. In fact, I got a report over the weekend about our investment revenue earnings report. And we're still getting invoices in. So we are working to close FY 2026 with our new accounting firm, Supporting Strategies. Our working relationship is going very well. And I've been in touch with the auditors about kind of getting a schedule from them of when everything will get started. You all are keenly aware of this, but obviously as of August 1st, we have opted into the section of Montgomery County's noise law that prohibits the use of gas-powered leaf blowers. I did put a blurb in the Bugle about that, so residents were just reminded that this is coming. On our own home front, earlier this month, we did purchase battery-operated leaf blowers for use by our maintenance team. The cost of that equipment was approximately $7,800. And we are going to try to sell our gas-powered leaf blowers on the government auction site, Public Surplus. Kind of switching to the Yendel Park construction project, which obviously Councilmember Selly has a bird's eye view. It's going very, very well, and it's nearing completion. But for the exception of several punch list items, they are substantially done. We will be doing a substantial completion punch list walk this week. I think most of you are probably aware of what a punch list walk is, but it's basically a customary step during the final stages of project construction to identify any work that is incomplete or does not meet the contract specifications. So we'll be doing that this week, and Keller Brothers has provided us with a list of the items that they acknowledge are not yet complete. One of those is the gravel lock application. We obviously had a deluge of rain. I think it was on Thursday. This is not a product that you would basically be installing during either when stones are wet or if it gets wet before the adhesive fully cures. It just can lead to a lot of problems. You will start seeing some changes on the site, as they are kind of winding things down. The Montgomery County Sediment Control Inspector did a final inspection and did approve the removal of the erosion and sediment controls that were on the site. So Keller did go ahead and remove all the filter logs on July 8th. There's been some other just job-related things, traffic cones, they had an information board. Those have started coming down. And they'll be removing the portable restroom. It was still there earlier today when I drove by, but that should be removed.
I think I went over there later today and it wasn't there.
Okay, so must have been between when I drove by and when you came by. The fencing will basically be removed towards the end of this month. As I mentioned, I think at last month's meeting, there was a delivery delay for the log play structure. This is sort of the banner time for playground ordering. So we've known about this for some time. It is currently scheduled for installation on July 23rd. So any questions about Yendel?
I think it looks great.
Yeah, it looks nice. I think
Exciting.
once we get the final invoices, I'll go ahead and be submitting everything to the Department of Natural Resources for us to get reimbursed.
Have we
For the grant
considered
funding.
whether want to hold any kind of grand opening event?
Yes. Thank you for that setup, Councilmember Bennett. So I think the only question is I've had a number of discussions with the project managers, and I know Barb is in continuous contact with them as well. As it stands, they feel they will be done with everything, including this equipment that we're still expecting, this the logs that are coming in by the 23rd, which is a Thursday. I will be circulated via constant contact, but the intention as it stands, I may have to walk this back if there are any delays. But we would like to have an acknowledgement of Letitia Yendel's wonderful charitable contribution. So many folks were involved with this, but having an opportunity to do a ribbon cutting on that Saturday, which is the 25th. More details to come. And again, the only reason that we haven't put these in cement as far as the details go is because we're just confirming that it will be done. We're trying to have this after the fence is removed and everything else, but yes.
Are we going to notify her heirs and invite them to the event?
They've already been invited.
Great. Glad to hear that.
Okay,
Thank you, Barb.
sure. Fairly lengthy update on the federal grant funding paperwork. Just in a nutshell, it is a slog, to put it kindly. So as I mentioned at the last meeting, I've been working with the cost estimating firm. This is a grant that has a lot of exclusions. Obviously, their focus is on the historic building. They do not pay for new construction or demolition typically. So everything to do with the rear addition is an ineligible cost. As a reminder, this is a 1-for-1 program grant requirement. Had a meeting earlier today with the cost estimating firm that Greg Wiedemann also participated in. One of the issues we have been working to resolve has to do with prevailing wage, Davis-Bacon on the federal side of things. This comes into play in a number of ways, basically. The project bid specifications, contract documents all need to reference prevailing wage. When I post, there's a part of the grant paperwork that if it's hard construction, you have to basically sign your life away, assuring that you will comply with everything. The way that Davis-Bacon was noted on that is where applicable. So obviously that kind of begs the question of, is it applicable? When I posed the question, which I thought would be easily answered by the National Park Service, they declined to provide a definitive answer. I think it's just because there's a number of interplays between federal agencies and federal regulations. So basically, I did enlist the town attorney to do a dive into federal regulations, and he has opined that Davis-Bacon compliance is required. On the state side of things, because there is a Maryland prevailing wage, as many of you might know, The Department of General Services indicated that the $300,000 grant did not trigger it, but the $500,000 grant did. I will be calling DGS later this week because they have stopped responding to emails. They pointed to a document in terms of their opinion that the $500,000 grant triggered prevailing wage. The document that they cited is one that I've read many, many times because it's sort of their guide to all things state grants. It does not mention prevailing wage anywhere. In my read of state law, which I did confirm with Mr. Bolt, is there's really two aspects to prevailing wage when you have projects that are funded by the state that are not state projects. It is not only a certain dollar amount, but it also, state law reads that it should be a certain percentage of the overall project cost. And I don't believe that's the part that DGS is picking up on. So I will be calling to see if there's someone I can speak to about that. So we may have two different prevailing wage issues in play. Basically, Davis-Bacon, as many of you may know, basically does set rates by state and oftentimes within state. So the wage rates themselves appear to be the same. So that's an issue on the state side we still have to unravel. So with at least the Davis-Bacon part being determined by the town attorney, the cost estimating firm is going to be sending me the updated project components breakdown after they have overlaid prevailing wage. So it's just a very slow process. The one thing I did just want to mention is as I was working with the National Park Service on this prevailing wage question, it did come up, as you know from previous discussions, the National Park Service has to approve the construction drawings. Those have to be submitted along with the other documents that constitute the grant agreement paperwork. So no construction can happen until that grant agreement is in place and the National Park Service has blessed the drawings. What came up most recently is that the National Park Service also has to basically approve the contractor that would be working on the project. So I have advised Wiedemann Architects of this. One of the questions Mr. Wiedemann I know has raised several times is whether the town, was interested in doing a request for qualifications process. I think this information from the National Park Service pretty much means that we should be doing an RFQ project to make sure that the contractor any contractor that we're considering hiring has some familiarity with the Secretary of the Interior standards for historic properties. And we will also be required to submit professional qualifications for all contractors before those contracts get signed. So there is a lot of paperwork associated with this grant and a lot of process. So I know one of the questions that came up earlier was when would we go under construction? And I think that's an open question right now, given the significant involvement of the National Park Service.
Barb, do you feel like you have the bandwidth, resources, not questioning your expertise, but some sort of knowledge of the process or outside support?
Yeah, I actually did start looking for someone. I had reached out to Elizabeth Hughes, who is the executive director of the Maryland Historical Trust, because in my discussions with the National Park Service, MHT functions as the State Historical Preservation Office for Maryland. Elizabeth, said she would get back to me. Someone did reach out to me. I'm still in discussions with that person. I think they have a lot of historic preservation experience. What I have not yet been able to discern fully is, do they have experience with with actual federal grants? Because it is a very different animal than anything else. Kayla had started to do some research. So this Save America's Treasures grant recipients are posted on the National Park Service website. I'm going to reach out to some of them to see how they manage this. I did reach out.
And because the library, the Noy Street Library was probably historic.
It is historic. They, as I understand it, received some state funding. That process is a walk in the park, quite frankly, compared to the federal process.
So
Um,
it's the federal.
yeah, I think there's just a lot more. I mean, I'm basically signing my name saying that I'm, under penalties of perjury, that I'm attesting to comply with everything. So, I will tell you that early on in this process, I clicked on one link in the National Park Service saying that took me to a 413-page document, and that was prior to any amendments that were applied. So at this point, no, it is not. I am looking to see if there's someone who can help. I did reach out to former Councilmember Paskowski. Once mentioned that he had clients who had gotten this specific grant. I had reached out to him fairly recently. Now I'm still going to reach out to them, but apparently that project goes back for them about 15 years. So it's not a recent thing. But I don't think a lot has changed, relative to this grant
Yeah.
based on what I'm seeing. So no, I'm definitely trying to see if I can find some help. When, Town Attorney Bolt was kind of weaving his way through the federal regulations. And he actually said after doing so, he had great sympathy for the National Park Service staff and understood why they probably declined to answer my question, because I think they probably just don't know, truthfully. I think it ended up being part of a Department of Labor regulation that tied back through some connection. But he even said that, it might be helpful for the town as it drafts the contract to actually find an attorney who actually specializes in federal contracting, just to make sure the i's are dotted and the t's are crossed, because it's not his area of expertise either.
It's also gonna limit who our general contractors can be if they haven't had any experience with Davis-Bacon or the state requirements. So that's gonna be
Yeah.
a big difference.
It is. And so I asked Mr. Bolt if he knew of anyone, any law firms that specialize in that. I was also going to circle back around with Clark Azar, because it's a different federal grant, but they have been involved in some federal contracting projects. And truthfully, just reach out to some colleagues to see if anyone, but this is a totally different animal for us than anything we've dealt with before.
Does that tech have any experience?
Not with the federal grants. He's participated in the calls, but I think it's, he's asked some questions too, because I think he was just trying to differentiate in terms of the state grants and the federal grants. I think that, Davis-Bacon, there is paperwork involved with that for contractors, as Lisa indicated. It's also a smaller pool of people who may have some familiarity.
And it's more expensive.
And it's more expensive. Mr. Wiedemann had reached out, I think it was Friday.
Through work, yeah.
And because the cost estimator, obviously Davis-Bacon does, prevailing wage does increase certain cost. I think the issue becomes if the Department of General Services sticks with this position that the $500,000 grant also triggers prevailing wage. Because the question that Mr. Wiedemann had posed is,
Give the money back and save the $500,000.
yeah, I think his question was, at some point, does it become
Diminishing.
Yeah, exactly. If the state maintains its position, even despite how I might read state law and Ron Bolt reads state law, then we're paying prevailing wage regardless. So I just think there's been a lot of question about when things are going to start. And there's no doubt that this federal grant has significant approvals. There are some at the state level, but it is nothing even close to this. They just want to see your contracts and basically approve them.
Yeah, I'm very surprised to see that the National Park Service would have to approve all construction documents, including that, which is not covered by the grant.
They actually, in the early conversations I had with them, it's like, do you want to see the whole project, or or you only care about the part you're funding? And they told me they only care about the part we're funding. So part of this afternoon's conversation with Mr. Wiedemann and with the cost estimator, if the Department of General Services at the state level were to say, oh, hey, we misread state law, and I'm not that optimistic about my chances of prevailing on that. Nothing like telling a state agency, hi, I think you're misreading the very law that you apply. We only have to then if that issue were to go away, then we're focusing on the project expenses that constitute the one-to-one match for the federal side, which is a much narrower scope than the entire project. So the question that Mr. Wiedemann posed, which is valid, is like, is there a way you only have the contractor have to pay prevailing wage on this very small subset of it? I think the issue is when they're hiring carpenters, they're hiring carpenters and they're pledging.
Same guys who.
Correct, correct. And so there is a layer of complexity that if we try to parse off what is covered by the federal grant and the match and what is not, I'm just not sure, practically speaking, how that would work. There may be a way to do it, but off the top of my head, they're hiring carpenters, they're pledging to pay them a certain rate. And if they then are hiring a sub, the general contractor is hiring a sub and say, well, this part of the work, I'll pay you this. For other parts of the work, I'm only paying you this. I'm not really sure on the ground how that would actually work. It's certainly something, we'll look at, but I think it's.
So Barb, just in
Yeah.
the interest of keeping us moving forward, if there are some of these resources that you feel would be helpful,
Yeah,
please keep us in the loop, and obviously we can
will.
talk, and because it is daunting, right? The more I hear these stories, the more daunting it becomes. So just please let us know.
We will.
And anything else on the federal grant before we move to maintenance team?
Hey, yeah, I've got a question. So are we looking at Buy America or Buy American? Because I happen to know that during the MML, they started talking about there's going to be a push towards applying Buy America.
There's nothing at the state level. They have, that's not mentioned in any of their grant paperwork.
Federal?
It's nothing that has been cited as far as the acts that are listed on the assurances that I have to sign. I've not seen that, but I'll just double check that. Yeah, it was, the Davis-Bacon were applicable, Copeland, which is an anti-corruption statute, and a few other things. So yes, we did also, Kayla had sent something out to kind of a small, or you did it to all of Maryland, didn't you?
65 of our colleagues in Maryland and Virginia.
Yeah, to see if anyone had ever gotten this grant, and the answer was no. It is a fairly restrictive grant just because of the nature of who qualifies for it. It either has to be a federally landmarked building or be part of a federal registered historic district, which is how we got in. So yes, I'll certainly keep you all posted. Just very quickly on the maintenance team. Some completed projects that they've done. We did some modifications to the HVAC system on the third floor. There's been a long history of the rental space going back to Mr. Rivers, I believe, of having not particularly great climate control in that space. They've also finished up some pruning and small tree removals that were requested by Mr. Normandy. This is obviously a busy time of year in terms of just mowing and weeding and watering some of the trees we planted this spring. I mentioned earlier that we are gearing up for the August 1st transition to, electric leaf blowers. They are doing some, changes in the layout of the shop, just to store the batteries and things like that.
Okay.
Hmm?
That they're doing okay with the transition. I'm sure they're.
Yeah, right now they're probably still using the gas-powered blowers.
I'll ask them offline.
Yeah. I think they're getting kind of playing around with the equipment when they have time and just sort of kind of getting the lay of the land. And then George Miller, our maintenance supervisor, at the request of Mayor Stroud, is looking for a company that can manufacture and install the mayoral recognition bricks that are in the plaza outside the post office. We're behind on a few mayors. So we're trying to find someone who can both kind of match the bricks, engrave them, and install them.
I can help you probably with that because my wife has just done a bunch of them for the pool. So I would suggest you
Okay.
call her.
Oh, I love it. Yes.
Yeah.
She's already gone through a bunch. And then JC was the one who actually laid them down. So
Okay. Yeah. If you can get that information, I'll share it with George. That'd be
We've got
great.
all the players.
Yeah.
Barb, thank you so much. Anything else on the maintenance team?
Nope.
I would just, well, this goes to you and staff as well. All big thanks for all the July 4th stuff. obviously you all, everything went very smoothly.
Right.
There was great communication, and the maintenance team, as a softball player, they went above and beyond to mow that field. So
I will let
thank
them-
you to our mayor for helping to make that.
No, I didn't do anything. I really do want to thank the staff as well and echo Councilmember Deutsch's sentiments. There was a lot to do, and there always is. The feedback that I got was very, very positive, very constructive. So thank you, as always. The next order of business is any unfinished business to be taken up by the council. I don't think we have any, but correct me if I'm wrong. Barbara, Kayla?
We don't know of anything.
All right, moving right along. Next order of business is a discussion of House Bill 1466, Senate Bill 891 on accessory dwelling units. You're also probably have heard them referred to as ADUs, and a possible authorization of a traffic study. Barb, could you walk us through where we are with this, the latest and greatest? Thank you.
So this law was passed in 2025. Thankfully, Mr. Bolt reminded all of his clients, myself included, of that the deadline was coming up. So I apologize as this did sort of fall off my radar screen for a bit. But basically, as Mayor Stroud mentioned, this has to do with accessory dwelling units or ADUs. The stated goal of the state legislation is to promote and encourage the creation of accessory dwelling units on land with a single-family detached dwelling unit as a primary dwelling in order to meet the housing needs of the citizens of Maryland. So there is a copy of the legislation included in your agenda packet. There are several aspects as it pertains to us. It does require local jurisdictions to adopt a local law authorizing the development of accessory dwelling units by October 1st. There's some other aspects of this. The local law may not impose side and rear setbacks on an accessory dwelling unit that are greater than the setbacks applicable to other types of accessory buildings, such as detached garages, sheds, things of that nature. And if you do have an on-site parking requirement, that has to be supported by, it cannot be imposed unless it's supported by a traffic study.
For each individual ADU or for the whole town?
For the whole town. So one of the questions that came up as we were kind of talking through this with Mr. Bolt and his advice to his clients, he has opined that if a municipality does not impose special setbacks or parking requirements, he doesn't necessarily believe that you have to have a proactive law that authorizes the development of accessory dwelling units. As everyone knows, we do not have zoning authority that is vested with Park and Planning. And they make certain determinations that are not within the realm of a municipality in Montgomery County. Mr. Bolt had also recommended to his clients, this was not applicable to us, that if you don't have side and rear setbacks for accessory structures, you should put them in place and quickly. We actually do have minimum side and rear setbacks for accessory structures, probably with the exception of Councilmember Selly. I think most of you were here for this, but we did pass an ordinance in June of 2025. So this would have been as Mayor Stroud, as a council member, came on board, and Councilmember Deutsch. This is a very broad-based ordinance dealing with building permits in general. As part of that ordinance, there was a section that did establish minimum side and rear setbacks for accessory structures. Our current minimum side and rear setbacks for accessory structures are both 5 feet. So we're in good shape on that because we do have them. I think the question that is before you all is whether those are setbacks that you would be comfortable with in perpetuity. The issue that Mr. Bolt had raised was that the new state law provides that accessory dwelling unit setbacks cannot be stricter than those quote unquote established for other accessory buildings. He has opined that this raises the question whether setbacks, our current setbacks could be basically amended in the future if that was to be desired. He said there's at least a legal question that suggests that any modifications should probably be in place by October 1st of 2026.
And what about parking, off-street parking?
Right, so we do have a parking requirement in the code that states there shall be provided at the time of the erection of any new dwelling unit within the town, a minimum of 2 off-street parking spaces for each such dwelling unit with adequate provisions for ingress and egress by standard sized motor vehicles. Uh, Two.
So if you have a house and you have an accessory dwelling unit, you need 4 parking spaces?
That is the way it would be interpreted now. So you have a couple options regarding just the parking. As I mentioned earlier, if you impose a parking requirement on ADUs, that has to be supported by a traffic study. There are a number of factors that would have to be included in the traffic study that include the cost to construct off-street parking spaces, whether sufficient curb areas exist along the front line of the property to accommodate on-street parking. There's an increase in impervious surface associated with creating off-street parking, and basically variability due to the size of the lot, parcel, or tract on which the accessory dwelling unit or primary dwelling is located. Clearly, what the state is basically wanting to do is to make sure that municipalities are not imposing certain requirements on ADUs to essentially discourage their establishment. So we do have an existing standard in the code, as I mentioned. I think you have 2 options, basically. One is to amend the code to basically limit that parking requirement to just the main structure on a lot. If the council is inclined to do that, then no parking study is required because you're removing the prohibition from the code or the restriction in the code. If you want to maintain the parking requirement, then a traffic study would be required. I did, and it's included in your agenda packet, obtain a traffic study proposal from Grove Slade. They are a transportation engineering firm that does a lot of work with governmental entities. There is a copy of their proposal in your agenda packet is attachment 3. I have to confess, when I first saw the fee, I kind of blanched a little bit. It is $23,000 plus an allowance of $1,000 for reimbursable expenses. I did check with one of our smaller municipality colleagues that is working with a different transportation engineering firm for exactly the same purpose, and the fees were there's some differences in scope of work. Each transportation engineering firm is going to approach this in a possibly a slightly different way, but Grove Slade's pricing is in line with what that neighboring municipality got from a different firm. It's just and you have to basically essentially look at your own jurisdiction. I did have some discussion with Grove Slade in terms of some of the impervious area, the cost. Montgomery County has also done a study, so we're going to try to leverage what we could if we go down this path. Certainly Clark Azar could provide some very good advice, but if you think about having to, look at curb area in your jurisdiction, that's a very data intensive process, and time literally translates into money. Part of it is looking at the size of parcels of land. So if there is any inclination, to try to keep what we have, that decision should likely be made this evening so this traffic study could get underway. And once again, I'd be the first to admit this issue did fall off my radar screen. I sincerely apologize for that. But this work would need to get started soon. I did have some communications with George Martin, the former chair of our Land Use Advisory Committee. As you all know, he's served in that capacity for many, many years. He is probably the ultimate authority, I think, on knowing everything in our building regulations, and I'm sure all of you, like me, have tremendous respect for him and his knowledge. So I did share a copy of the legislation with him, asked if he had any thoughts about, what his thoughts were about either possibly modifying, the setbacks for accessory structures. Town Attorney Bolt did mention that he has some clients, including the town of Chevy Chase, who don't have just a 5-foot setback like we have. Their setbacks somewhat vary based on the height and the length of the accessory structure, so they take into account massing. For those of you who were on the council and were part of the discussions about the building permit ordinance, you may recall that there was some discussion during that process about possibly putting in kind of some modifiers in terms of taking that into account. Ultimately, that discussion was sort of truncated, I think, in the interest of kind of getting that ordinance passed. So this has been something that you briefly talked about in 2025.
I don't understand, Barb. Maybe you can help me understand.
Sure.
What's the traffic study gonna study? What is it that they're trying to?
They're trying to meet the requirements that are in the Maryland land use article, Lisa. So, there's nothing specific in the scope except, we'll try to leverage some other resources. But what the state is basically mandating is that if you want to impose parking requirements on accessory dwelling units, those restrictions have to be supported by a traffic study. They then,
What's the traffic?
yeah, they then,
Yeah, like,
yeah, so the state basically, this is actually spelled out in state law, what the traffic study has to encompass, and I'll just
Okay.
read it. A local law adopted under this section, meaning the land use article, may establish additional off-street parking requirements that consider, one, the cost to construct off-street parking spaces, two, whether off-street, whether sufficient curb area exists along the front line of the property to accommodate on-street parking. Three, the increase in impervious surface due to the creation of new off-street parking and the relation to any applicable stormwater management plans. And four, variability due to the size of the lot, parcel, or tract on which the accessory dwelling unit or primary dwelling is located. And basically, the second part of this is simply reiterating that that a traffic study is required if you're trying to impose parking requirements.
that for every property in the whole town or just specific ones that are designed to accommodate an accessory dwelling unit?
It is actually, it is not for every, it is a blanket study of your municipal boundaries.
It's the whole town.
It's the whole town.
Barb, thank you for walking us through. I want to make sure that we are focused on the right thing here. This legislation is very broad. I want to just bifurcate it between two central issues: the setback issue on one side
Mhm.
and the ADU parking on the other.
Correct. You're right. There are two different aspects of this law.
So as obviously the state of Maryland's intent, Barb, as you stated, was to not create a disincentive or to discourage what is very important to the state of Maryland and these ADUs. The traffic study, if it came back favorably after we paid $23,000, would give us the ability to keep what we have.
Correct.
So if we don't do the traffic study, we have no justification to apply the two parking spot requirement for the ADUs. So where does that leave us? You had mentioned having to revise the code. I don't see where we'd have to revise the code.
The standard to have parking spaces for basically dwellings generally, not the primary structure, is already in the code.
Right.
So if you all decide that the traffic study, you don't want to go down that road, what that means is that the code has to be amended to clarify that the current parking standard only applies to the primary structure, or you could take change the parking standard in some other manner. So there's no state prohibition on imposing parking standards for a primary dwelling unit. What the state is now saying is if you want to mandate that off-street parking spaces be required for an ADU, you can't do that unless a traffic study is conducted and that supports your existing parking requirement.
And when you say existing, you're saying one that has been fully adopted by October 1st of 2026. Doesn't have to be our current existing. So
No, it does not have to be.
could actually, with a traffic study support, amend our code to allow or to require at least one off-street parking per
Correct.
accessory dwelling if the traffic study supported that.
Correct.
So that's another option for
It
them.
is.
Zero.
What would the?
We could say zero, but I just want people to kind of think about the
Right.
picture here.
Right.
I don't know what the right answer here is. And we do want to encourage more availability of housing. But say.
And also green space. You know, like we don't want to just
Sure,
make asphalt
But-
all over the town
right.
for
But
cars.
if someone builds an accessory dwelling unit, they could rent it out through Airbnb. And all of a sudden, 2 or 3 cars show up when that Airbnb is rented.
I
And
know,
there's
we have-
no,
Yeah.
excuse me, let me finish. And there's no off-street parking for that accessory dwelling unit. So all those cars are suddenly on a Garrett Park Street
Right.
That's not.
for however long that house is rented.
But did
Or
we-
it might be a permanent resident.
Correct.
There might be several people there and they each have their own car. So those accessory dwelling units bring cars with them. There's no getting around that. So we just have to make sure we're willing to accept that we're not going to require parking spots to go with these houses when they're
with the
built,
ADUs.
the ADUs,
Yeah.
right? And
On
that
the
those
site.
cars will then be on the street.
Correct.
Yeah. And if I may just clarify, because I think Lisa's, going back in prior to my time, but there was an opportunity under the county staffer is no longer there. He was around a really long time. And there are questions about this, but basically the county has recognized that if a municipality sent a letter under a certain provision in county law and stated that short-term rentals such as Airbnbs, VRBOs, if we came out and proactively stated that those were not allowed within the boundaries, which we have done. So this is really not a question of short-term rentals because we already prohibit those, and that is on record with the county.
I thought we did.
We did. I'm sure we did.
We did. I can send you all the letter that was sent. So short-term rentals should not be your concern. Those are already prohibited. Now, that doesn't mean that someone might not be doing it illegally. But the issue here is really strictly ADUs,
Is the
for-
short-term rental specific to ADUs or is it still allowed for like single
it's not,
bedrooms?
it's not limited to ADUs. Yeah, so there's a couple different layers here. So there's going to be like the short-term rentals that most of us think about as like Airbnbs. There is the county rental licensing where someone can like rent out a room or rent out their home or rent out an ADU for that matter. And those are allowable, subject to certain county licensing and regulations. So I will just, since the subject has come up, I will send you the letter that addresses short-term rentals, just so you all have it. But I think really the issue before you tonight, and thank you, Jerry, for pointing out it, you could amend the code not to require 2 parking spaces for an accessory structure, an accessory dwelling unit. But if we have any version of a parking requirement that is applicable to accessory dwelling units, that has to be supported by a traffic study. So whether that's the current 2 spaces, if that is reduced to 1, the state's mandate is that if you're going to require off-street parking for an ADU, that has to be supported by a traffic study, and there's no getting around that.
But if we say that ADUs could have parking off-street, then we have to have a study, or we don't have to have.
If you are mandating off-street parking for an ADU, that requires a traffic study.
And the only way we're going to really know is to get the traffic study. Yeah.
Correct. And one of my questions to Ron Bolt at one point, because Grove Slade had asked me this, trying to look at the timing of what would need to be done when, is that if you wanted to, there was no change in the code, for example. I asked Ron Bolt, then how does legislatively, what do you do to tie your traffic study to what we would be doing? If the standard that you all wish to keep is what exists, today, then it would likely be a matter of adopting some resolution and pointing to the findings in the traffic study that support what's already in the code.
We don't have yet.
Correct.
And to be clear, we could engage this traffic study and could say, no, we could pay
Right.
$23,000 and we would be back where we are. The
Yes.
timing of this, sorry, apologies. Go ahead, Lisa, go ahead.
Some of the streets are narrow, so that if there was parking on both sides of the narrow streets, cars can't really pass through there. So I
Right.
think that's gonna be an obstruction.
And
It
that,
happens every day in Garrett Park. I had to deal with a poor distraught resident on Saturday who was parked in front of my house and had her mirror taken off by a passing car. I mean, granted, it was Saturday morning, Amy, swim meet, Garrett Park congestion, but it does happen frequently on Low Oxford, on the east side of Oxford. I've turned, backed out and gone a different, had to not be able to go down the street
Right.
routinely
yes,
because you cannot get through.
no, and
And there are multiple streets in Garrett
there
Park.
are, and that was one of the issues. I mean, I sometimes, depending on if someone's going to be turning, so I'm coming down Strathmore and making a right onto Waverly, if sometimes I see someone up ahead with their left turn signal on that I know is going to be sitting there for a while, I'll go down Montrose. And if you have a landscaping truck parked at, right across from a car, oftentimes, I pull off to the side to the car coming towards me can get through because both of us weren't getting through. That was for sure. So there is a lot of data collection. I think there's a decent likelihood on, depending on what you do on both of these issues, that a special meeting may be required at some point between, before October 1st. But yeah, as Jerry said, I think there's some options. There's basically three options. One is you only apply the parking requirement, off-street parking to a main structure, in which case we can avoid a traffic study. We do a traffic study to try to support what is already in the code, or to Jerry Lee's point, you do a traffic study to try to support a scaled back version of that. But those are really, it's a fairly finite decision-making point in terms of what is required by the state.
The first step is to get the traffic study, see what it says.
No,
Assuming that you want to have ADU subject to some kind of off-street parking, yes.
Right. The first step is to decide if we're still interested in having off-street traffic.
Right.
Or off-street
Well-
parking requirements.
I would argue that we need the traffic study because we don't know if we change it, what the impact's gonna be.
Right.
We don't have the data ourselves and short of going out and doing it. So I think that we're kind of in a situation where we really should look at getting the traffic study because that way we'll have hard data to look at and we can then make a decision which way or the other. But I don't think it's 23 grand lost, if you will, to get the data.
Yeah.
I think you're right. We have I'm sorry, go ahead. I was just gonna say, I think unfortunately, we have to make the decision very quickly and it feels expensive in the short term. But if we don't, we're foreclosing that opportunity forever, it appears.
there's a, well,
I
not,
mean, what
sorry.
kind of data are we expecting to collect from traffic study that we're not already talking about firsthand, right? That there
Yeah.
are streets here, limited parking, that there are challenges. I'm just curious what we would be getting out of that.
Yeah, I mean, one, the state anecdotal evidence that all of us might experience driving the streets of Garrett Park isn't going to be sufficient for the state purposes. They want to see a transportation engineering firm kind of stamp. What Grove Slade, as I said, having seen another transportation engineering firm approach, everyone's going to approach it slightly different. In terms of Grove Slade, kind of keeping it at a fairly high level, one was just a parking inventory. So looking at on-street parking, documenting roadway widths, curb restrictions, no parking areas, where fire hydrants are, intersections because you can't park within, so many feet of an intersection. So that's kind of task one of their traffic study. They'll take that data then and kind of evaluate existing parking utilization, look at what does that mean in terms of any future parking demand that might be triggered for an ADU.
Lauren,
Yes.
am I right to assume that part of the reason for this requirement is that it sort of implies that any mandating of off-street parking for an ADU is a way of discouraging the building of ADUs?
That's 100% why the state is doing this. Yeah,
That's correct.
that's correct.
And I'm not suggesting we discourage ADU construction. I just think in a town like Garrett Park with our narrow streets, that we do need to make sure we have adequate parking, because I think it's a false assumption that those ADUs will not come with cars. They will come with cars.
May I make an obvious point? And forgive me for making such an obvious point, but there is an opportunity cost for requiring off-street parking. And that opportunity cost is we are removing green space that is currently grass, right? I want to make sure that we're clear that I'm not advocating one or the other. I want to make sure that we're making this decision with our eyes open. We spent a lot of time last month talking through the driveway permits, and one of the ideas that was important, I think, to a number of folks was the permeability of the surface. We are introducing the possibility, if we go down the route, if we spend 23,000, if the traffic study, it's kind of a decision tree. One side could say, no, it doesn't support it. There, we spent $23,000. We have data. It didn't work. The other is we spent 23,000. It justifies it. Now we have in the code that not only structures, but ADUs require off-street parking. That off-street parking is going to come with a removal of permeable space.
We could actually legislate permeable surfaces for off-street parking behind primary structures.
I would agree 100%. We can definitely, I mean, they're out, there. Permeable surfaces are already out there.
Well, cars have to go somewhere. So they're either gonna go, and I'm wondering, Barb, could we, after the traffic study comes in, could we designate narrow roads where they have to have on-street parking and wider roads where they can have off-street parking? Or do we have to just have a blanket rule for the whole town? I'm asking the question. I don't know the answer.
It's an interesting question, Lisa. I think it's a little bit, I mean, certainly you can designate certain streets that you're concerned about the narrowness as parking on one side only, you know, for emergency vehicle access. I'm not sure, I can talk to Mr. Bolt about it. I'm not sure how you would codify basically that parking requirements, because they are a building regulation. I'm not sure how much you can parse that easily to say, here's a parking requirement, but it only is applicable on certain streets. That's certainly something I can talk to Ron about.
Right.
It's not, it would not be a common practice, but that doesn't mean it can't be done.
Okay.
So we have 10 more minutes on this topic, and then I'm going to move us on to town updates. Given the timing, we are July, we are not meeting in August. I suspect that, Barb, correct me if I'm wrong administratively, but if we are going to have this study kicked off, we would have to vote on that this evening, right?
Yeah,
Otherwise,
yes.
we're just not going to meet the window.
Yeah,
Okay.
and once again, I apologize sincerely for this falling off my radar screen. Yeah,
okay.
we would need to probably sign a contract and this week and get them going.
Let me, sorry, Barb,
Or no, that's it.
let me do this. I don't have a vote. I do want to encourage all council members to consider the investment. It's not insignificant. We certainly, obviously, you know, what we want to determine is, are we moving forward with this traffic study, right? If we are moving forward with this traffic study, we will vote yes or no, but I would encourage each council member to consider the fiscal side of it and what we're really looking to accomplish. I think everyone agrees that in certain areas, on-street parking is an issue. Is this the way that we want to do it? Do we want to spend the town's money on collecting data to then determine our direction?
Is it even an option?
If whether or not it's an option, which, and there is a likelihood that we
Right.
will engage this study and it comes to nothing. I would,
Right.
again, I don't have a vote, but I would encourage each council member who does to take that fiscal question into
Well,
mind as we do it.
I would worry too that you spend the money to do the study and that has an impact on then the decisions we make, and you would almost like to justify the study, right? That would feel like, oh, well, we need to impose this parking requirement on ADUs. Because we
Because
spent
the
the money to
studies-
be able to do so.
Because the study says we can.
Right.
Right, because by paying, by being somewhat extorted for $23,000, we have to, you know, we
But
now
this-
have the ability to do this.
But the study also may say we can't do it.
That's right.
How would it,
We won't know until we order the study,
how would the study come back saying we can't?
because they'll say that the
There's not-
streets are.
That there's
too narrow and
adequate
right,
on-street
that they
parking.
they
Right.
Can't do off-street parking.
By the way, the study is supposed to, apparently per the state law, also factor in the reduction of, or the increase of impervious surfaces. So that's supposed to be factored into the study.
Impervious purposes on off.
Surfaces, yeah, for the off-street
off-street,
parking.
Right.
Mhm.
So
See, we s-
I'm with Phil on this. I think we should do the study personally, because I don't know how we make this decision without some data and empirical information.
the other problem too is that if we wait too long, I don't think we can do it.
Oh, yeah, we can't. We only have till October 1st
Right.
to fully complete whatever legislation we want to undertake.
So I think Phil and Jerry have made their points clear. Erica, Chris, Lisa, are you comfortable voting on whether or not we get a traffic study this evening? Or do you need a little bit more time? We can call a special meeting. We did not have enough time. We did not have a lot of time to think about this. So I want to, grant respect if we want to spend a little bit more time. But
I have a data question. I don't know if you know this, Barb,
Mhm.
but do we know how many ADUs there are in Garrett Park? Like, do homeowners have to register that information with the town?
They actually have to, if they're renting them, they have to get a rental license from the county. So there's some information from that. There definitely are some. Now, whether some are being rented out, I can think of one instance, and it is on one of our more narrow streets that our maintenance team hates plowing because of the parking situation.
Oh, it's a nice street.
Yours isn't,
Your street.
yours isn't,
My
gr-
curve.
yours isn't great either, but it's not number one on their list.
Good.
This is a case where it's really, there is an ADU, I mean, technically, but it's more of an in-law suite. They have family members living there. I can probably think of about maybe close 4 to 6 that I can think of off the top of my head that are rental units.
But that
Uh-huh.
number can change.
It can change.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and the whole purpose of this state law is to encourage the construction of more housing.
Right.
Right.
I mean, I'm kind of hopeful that maybe the study could support us changing our requirement to be 1 versus the current 2. But I really wouldn't have a basis for suggesting that
Right.
change without the study.
Right.
One off-street and one on-street.
Right.
Or.
Well, remain just 1 off-street. We
Oh.
can't require, I
Can't
mean,
require
it just
on-street.
means that whatever
So
other
just
cars they
going
bring to the house
for-
But
are
for
on
one.
put
street.
up a small accessory for an aging in-law. And
Right.
you're required to put a off-street parking.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, right now,
For a person who may not.
right now, we require 2. That's our current status.
For
quo.
somebody who's in one.
Yeah.
For accessory.
Accessory dwellings, yeah. Our status quo is 2.
Too.
But to be clear, we could revise the code to say that excludes ADUs, and that's only for primary structures.
That's correct.
And then what do ADUs say? We have no requirement?
That would be, yes, that would be the case.
No requirement for off-street parking, correct? That's
Or
an option.
ons-
On-street
Well,
is,
Yeah, it's just,
Non-street parking
Yeah.
is currently free. so
yeah.
Is what?
It's free. Like,
right.
if-
Parking spaces aren't reserved on a public street, though
Oh.
people often think they are.
We could say 1.
Correct.
But I don't know how how this traffic study would help us figure that out.
I think it looks at the width of streets, because obviously that impacts parking on both sides. Truthfully, the more stop signs you have, you have fewer parking spaces as a practical basis because you can't park within so many feet of an intersection typically, how many fire hydrants you have. So that's all the kind of data that needs to be collected and if we want to have an off-street parking requirement for ADUs.
Barb, do you have an opinion about what we should do?
No, I think this really gets down to how important is it to maintain some semblance of the parking requirement we have. I would note that, Mr. Martin, who, I have great respect for, basically his opinion, and he's obviously not you, he doesn't vote for this. I just asked him to weigh in. You know, he does feel that there would be some benefit to having a parking study and actually having it looked at. And that's his that's just his opinion, but I think he's knowledgeable about this issue and he's lived here a long time, just as many of you have.
What if we said we don't want to do the parking study, but we want to change the parking requirement to saying if you have an ADU, you only have to have one parking space?
You would still have to have a parking study because you're requiring something, you're imposing a parking requirement on an ADU.
So then we have to have the parking study to do that.
Yeah, so, yeah.
To be clear, the kind of the two-step process is if we choose to modify the code such that our two-car off-street parking requirement would exclude ADUs, then that would obviate the need for a traffic study.
Mhm.
If we, on the other hand, want to get the traffic study done, I want to have, again, I want to be really respectful that the council members haven't had a ton of time to look at this. I'm happy to have a special meeting just dedicated to this so you can take more time to study it. But if all five of you feel, or a consensus feel, that you're ready to vote on whether or not we want a traffic study, I'm happy to take a vote on that as well. Do we need more time or ready for a vote on the
Just
traffic study?
mentioning that there is also the second issue. So
Yeah.
I don't want
Yeah,
to
yeah.
forget about that.
No, no,
There's also the height and massing and the setback issue.
I mean,
That's,
I'll just speak for myself, but I would prefer to have a special meeting on this.
Okay.
I think it's not an easy decision, right? Like I would fully respect the need for additional housing, but then potentially mandating additional off-street parking
yeah.
then gets into the nature and character of our community, right? You're gonna have 4 cars potentially in someone's yard and
Yeah.
extrapolating that's not really ideal. So I think we should.
It's
consider-
nuanced.
And then they're gonna have to take down their beautiful trees to put up an asphalt
Yeah.
pad.
May I propose that we, yeah. May I propose that we have a special meeting? So to give the council members time to look at a lot of that. There's a lot of data here. There's a lot of nuance. I think that Erica brings up a very good point, which is there is opportunity cost for both. So
One more quick question, Barb, in your read of the state law, if we wanted to limit on-street parking more, would we have that? Did the law have any limitations on that? So for example, if we were to decide either with or without a traffic study that some of our streets are simply too narrow to continue allowing on-street parking on both sides, did the law have any limitations on that kind of local legislation?
It did not specifically. Obviously, Garrett Park's been an incorporated municipality for many, many years. I don't know what the enforcement mechanism is going to be from the state, but I think if suddenly, in the wake of this legislation, we start suddenly not allowing parking on both sides of the street where we've allowed it for 50, 75 years, the timing might be viewed suspiciously. It's like, why are you suddenly doing it now when you didn't think it was a problem before? But no, there's nothing that I've seen in state law or anything that Ron Bolt has shared with me.
Well, I just think that it might be worth when we have this special meeting, thinking about this holistically. If we're going to take measures that may or may not increase on-street parking, where anecdotally, there have been concerns expressed in different spots, not
Yeah.
every street.
No, there's some that are very, very tight.
In
Yeah.
other words,
Yeah, do we continue to?
asking the studiers to look at maybe things beyond
Right,
this
yeah,
being an issue. Yeah.
exactly.
What's the date we would need to sign a contract on a traffic study, Barb? Roughly?
I'm trying to think if I have. Yeah, I mean, I think the longer and once again, I take responsibility for my role and you all feeling squeezed. I would just say if you need to have a special meeting, I would have it very soon.
Maybe another 2 weeks.
Oh, I think if you're out 2 weeks, I mean, you're already starting to
Within day-
get,
sure,
yeah.
within day.
This is very intensive data collection. It's going to take some time. And we also have to build in that if you want to, the only ordinance thing that doesn't take time is if you leave things the way they are. If you have to remove the parking restriction, there's a process for that. If you want to amend the parking requirements for ADUs, time has to be built in for that. So,
They need time to review what the study results are.
correct. So, I will leave it to you. I would just say I would not be putting your special meeting out 2-3 weeks because at that point, I think it's starting to become a moot issue. I don't think you'll be
Okay.
able to hit the timing.
Kayla, I'll work with you to schedule a meeting for next week on this. Thank you very much. Appreciate everyone's input.
Before you move on though, is there,
If you do it next week, I'm gonna need to do it online because I'm out of town.
It's going to be online. Irrespective. It's going to be online for everybody.
are you comfortable with the side and rear setbacks as they exist today, or is that something? I'm just trying to figure out, is the special meeting limited to the traffic study part, or do you have interest in talking about the setback? Then
I
too?
think to Jerry's point, it'll need to address both.
Okay.
Yeah. Next order of business is town updates. Councilmember Deutsch, would you like to start us off with Parks Advisory Committee updates? If there are any.
Quickly, I had notes somewhere. Oh, well. Parks is currently engaged in a couple of things. One thing they're looking at, is they're picking up on some work Phil and many others did many, many years ago around whether or not there should be some kind of rental, procedure for Cambria Field. So once that field opens, it's gonna be big and flat and nice, and there may be soccer teams and others who want to rent it. It was looked at many years ago. No policy was adopted. They're just taking a look and they're going to make a recommendation one way or the other on what that might look like if it was something to move forward with. Thank you, Barb and Erica, for your patience with me. We're going to push this court scraping event back a little bit. I was got a little ahead of myself trying to think that could be done last weekend. We'll do that in September when it's a little cooler out. We have a little more time to plan, and so more to come on that. Parks. So we are working on preliminary language, kind of scope of work for what might be. If you recall, you all, based on the recommendation from the committee, provided funding in the budget for a planning study.
Right.
And so there's work that's begun on a scope of work for what would ultimately, I guess, be a bid for that. Barb, remind me of the threshold for RFPs.
This would be professional services, so, it is a little bit different. Contracts that require approval by the council are 15,000. There's really, without getting too detailed, a couple ways y'all could handle this. You could put it out to bid. You could also, since it is a professional service, and we always have the opportunity to write other contracts, and so that's something I can talk to you.
And I'll get with you offline. I don't want to bog us down. Is that it may make sense to look at one group, like almost potentially Clark Azar or someone like that, to do the very necessary, like, what are the boundaries, what's the legality, Manny Woods, like, get all of those questions answered.
Yeah.
And then phase 2 is a design build firm that can take all the great input we've received,
Yeah.
develop some concepts, work with us.
Sure, there is, and I can talk to you offline. I did authorize Round Bolt and I have that information back. I haven't had a chance to review it. We did go ahead and do some title search work, just to see if there are any covenants. So I will forward that to all of you. So some of that preliminary work has already been done.
Yeah. Okay, that's.
Good. Councilmember Schultz, you had some time to spend at the MML conference down at the beach?
Yes.
How was that?
Yeah, it's pretty good, actually. Well worth it. And before I start, I will say that I was able to download a lot of the presentations for things, some of the stuff I didn't even go to, but I've got the presentations. So I'm going to figure out how to get them over to Barb or Kayla, who can then put them somewhere we can glom onto them. Anyway, so one of the things that came up was I went to the federal briefing, and they talked about the Buy America, Build America Act. It's part of the infrastructure reauthorization, and that's the reason I asked that question earlier. So that may be coming in. This is something relatively new, they said. That they also talked about OMB guidance. There's two, the compliance burden is crazy, and so they want to try and basically reduce the burden on this stuff. But they also did say that they do extend the Buy America Act to everything. So I know that's a general statement. So again, suggest check into that. Also, the National League of Cities was there. They also worked with us, representing the towns and so forth, municipalities of Montgomery County and Maryland. Risk management was good. Basically, it talks about, it was like insurance type stuff. That was real good. That, brought up some nice examples on things. Like one of the interesting things he brought up was that, 10% of the thing is losses of claim, 90% is indirect costs from losing time to having to assign people to work to do something, support the rebuilding of the object, whatever it was. And so it's something where, you have to look at it, make sure that as you look over things, just remember that insurance is not going to necessarily pay for everything. They talked about the fact that if you get a certificate of insurance, it's really only a snapshot in time. It's quite possible that the next day, that certificate may be no good, depending on if they paid the insurance or not. They also suggested that on the town councils or town boards that they have a safety officer that could rotate month by month, but somebody who basically is in charge of going around checking on safety, making sure, your fire extinguishers properly tagged. I mean, stuff we do in the railroad where fire extinguishers tagged. Are people wearing the proper protective equipment for the job they're doing? I know that, well, yeah, about that. Anyway, so there's things like that. We talked about do we have any type of mutual aid agreement set up where if our town barn were to burn down, we lost our tractor and some of the other equipment, could we go to somebody else or a bunch of somebody else's and ask if we could borrow some equipment until we had time to replace the stuff that we lost? What else do we have? So there was one on Robert's rules, which I'm not going to get into, but there's a nice handout that's part of the stuff that I downloaded. And it was something that I would suggest that, we could look at. I mean, not that we need to do a lot of Robert's rules, but basic idea is that you have something. But the guy who is presenting actually was over in Rockville. So that's kind of nice. We talked about went to a thing on AI, and basically it talks about getting a professional to come in to help you with AI, make sure that your security is correct, and make sure that the AI is not drawing from spots it's not supposed to, or it's not hallucinating, which is basically making up stuff, because I've actually run into that myself where it starts adding things that would sound good, but are outside of the scope. So it's, something we should probably look at, because I mean, it's coming, and it's something, it's like, digging a ditch with a shovel or a backhoe. I mean, either one will do the job, just which one's gonna be faster and easier, and, what was the other thing we had? Yeah, those were basically the big things that I had. But again, I'll send off that stuff. There are some nice presentations in there of things, so.
Yeah, Phil, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Really appreciate it. I'm a big fan of Robert's rules. I think it's great. Just last thing for me, and then we'll adjourn. Barb brought up George Martin on the Land Use Committee. Up to this point, the committee has existed as an ad hoc committee and basically responding to requests as they arrive. Land Use Committee. But I think as the town continues to grow and thrive, we can be more deliberate in honoring the kind of the special character, including open space, architectural diversity, community oversight. With that in mind, and to preserve the historic quality and character of the town, and really also to maintain control of our growth and development. In September, we are off in August, but in September, I will be recommending to the council that we transition this increasingly important function from an ad hoc committee to a statutory committee. So that to come in September. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make the motion.
We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody, so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.